Hello and welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast. On today's show, we've got a very special show. Adam's just been to the Barber Motorsports Park and he's been there to see the Barber Museum. So he's going to give us the full rundown of his experience. And we've also got an interview with Brian Close from the museum. Today's podcast, as ever, is brought to you by Renthal Street and by Pole Position Travel. So check out renthal.com and the Fit My Bike tool to be able to see all the options available for your bike. And check out polepositiontravel.com if you're looking to come to any Grand Prix, Superbikes, or even the Isle of Man TT through the course of the year. Adam, without further ado, I have to say, I was very jealous whenever I heard you, Barber, because that museum it's unbelievable looking. It looks like it's an art museum, not a car museum or a bike museum. And they really do showcase everything like it's artwork.
Yeah, I completely agree, Steve. I mean, just as some context, I might have said it on a couple of other podcasts, but I was reasonably in town for Barber by going to the Birmingham Supercross, which is maybe 20 minutes down the road from the circuit in the museum. And it was impossible not to stop there on the way back and then to fly, well, via Las Vegas to Austin for the USGP. But yeah, I mean, you always kind of hear about Barber. You see it pop up on social media or you hear people talking about it and you kind of think, well, you know, it's just going to be another museum dedicated to motorsport. And, you know, I've been to sort of quite a few over the years, whether it's sort of the pokey confines of the Ducati factory museum or, you know, the impressive facility that Harley Davidson have in Milwaukee. Yamaha's Communications Plaza is a great sort of foyer full of historical pieces. You know, there's been quite a few. I mean, KTM's Motor Hall is a fantastic concept that's not just a museum. It's kind of like an interactive exploration of the brand. But yeah, to go to Barber and actually sort of walk through those doors, and thanks to our friend and colleague Matthew Mars for setting it up. I mean, we only had an hour to look around, but it was mind-blowing. I mean, the scale of the collection, the amount of pieces they have, the way they have it organized, it's bewildering. You really don't know where to look or where to start. And I guess that's quite that's quite a strong point for any museum. But then also there were one or two sort of areas where you thought, well, you know, this could be even better if it focused maybe on more of a narrative. And I bring this up with Brian in the interview, but obviously while we were there and then at Austin for the USGP, there was a narrative around a second Grand Prix happening in the United States. And I know you've been doing some stuff for Moto America and you will be again this year, Steve, but what's your general sort of opinion on Barber? I mean, do you think it's a venue that could fit MotoGP? There was a lot of discussion going on about it, and the general opinion seems to be that the circuit's too small, too tight, the infrastructure's not there. But then I kind of think the infrastructure wasn't there at Laguna Seca, but everybody kind of longs to go back to Monterey. And then, you know, the circuit itself is not too dissimilar in length and layout to, say, Sachsenring, which is one of the most popular Grand Prix on the calendar.
Yeah, for me, I think Barber as a circuit is fit to host MotoGP, but as a facility, it isn't. And it'll come down to just how motivated Dorna or Liberty when they take over Dorna actually are to have another race in America, because there's a lot of work would need to be done to Barber to bring it up to the standards we expect. Not least the fact that they don't have garages. Everything's with pit awnings because of the way the pit road is built and everything like that.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of changes that would have to be made. None of them are insurmountable. I think that's probably the most important thing, because if you go to Indonesia, I remember going to Mandalika for the first time, and we arrived literally as they were finishing the buildings, and it was all prefabbed up and ready to go. So it is one of those things where you can build it at short notice. It doesn't have to be like the old complex at Silverstone that's going to stand for 100 years. It can be something that's just modern and prefabbed and just, you know, plug and play. So it can be done, but I think that Barber would be a challenge. And I always think that the easiest way to test these things out is to put World Superbikes to these places first, because if you look at Buriram, I think Buriram's probably the best example of it, because we had big crowds in Buriram. We didn't really get big crowds in Indonesia, but Buriram, the first year Superbikes went there, the second year, the place was absolutely packed, but they didn't have hotels, they didn't have the facility fully ready. And then you ended up where by the second, third, fourth year for Superbikes, because MotoGP was coming, the crowd dwindled a little bit for Superbikes and was ready for GP. But by the time GP went, all the hotels were built, everything was ready to go, roads were good, the infrastructure was there. And I think that that's probably the important thing, is to be able to try and look at it where how can we have something that's really successful 5 years down the road? And that's really where I think if Dorna own both Superbikes and MotoGP, you need to use Superbikes to your advantage. And I think that's one of the things I've always said it. If Liberty come in, they'll own Formula One, MotoGP, and World Superbikes. And then you've actually got a lot of power to be able to go to circuits and say, if you want to host Formula One and MotoGP, you have to take Superbikes, and then you're able to build things up step by step, especially in new tracks like this. I think Barber would be unbelievably cool if we went there for any championship, whether it's MotoGP or Superbikes, because, and I'm sure you saw it when you were there, Ad, all the artwork all the way around it, the fact that, I know it sounds silly, there's no grandstands, it's all on hills. It's so unique that it could be really different and really cool, but it's up to the championships to figure out how you can make those things work. And that's where, like I said, if I was in charge, I'm using Superbikes to almost be a pilot series to see how it can work.
It's a good idea, but I just wonder if they'll be able to implement it for, say, 2026, because there does seem to be a feeling of urgency. I mean, I think Dorna were looking at a second US GP already from 2024. Dialogue is happening already this year, and you kind of think, well, is there a possibility of a US GP happening in 2026? It would be good if, maybe Superbike did test the water and then GP went there in 27. Of course, 2027 is going to be a big mix-up year for MotoGP anyway. But I mean, as people will hear through the interview, I kind of tacked it on at the end because it's still a delicate subject. I mean, Brian was in, Kota, not just a drop off Kenny Roberts's, fantastic old Honda, but, the KR version, that is. But he was also there to have a meeting with Dorna. And from what I understand, the discussions were quite lengthy, quite comprehensive. And one of the best things about the museum is just there's a feeling of unlimited resources. I mean, of course, that's not the case. But when you have like a designer like Pierre Terreblanche in the top floor of the place, and you have this open-minded attitude to events, to motorcycles, to collections, then, there is a feeling of endless possibilities. So that's why out of all the considerations we've had for MotoGP, Barber feels like it has the most potential. I think, it might even just come down to, the owners at Barber whipping out the checkbook. Like you say, infrastructure can be sort of erected and put in place.
I think it's also one of those ones where people talk a lot about safety for these kind of circuits. And one of the things that's always interesting to note is, it doesn't have the certification for MotoGP. That's also one of the things that's very easy to sort out. Because if you think back to last year when we went to Cremona for the first time in World Superbikes, obviously Cremona's on my mind because we're going there next week. But I did a big interview with Jarno Zafali for our Patreon supporters. So patreon.com/Paddock Pass podcast, and check that one out because it's Jarno talking about how, as a circuit designer, he designed circuits to meet the lowest safety requirement, but to have the option of being at the highest level, because the changes you have to make for a B grade to an A grade aren't actually that significant. He said that if you're able to make a B circuit, in all likelihood, it will be able to qualify for an A if you look to homologate the circuit for that. But circuits don't want to homologate for A unless they have the requirement for A. Obviously, World Superbikes has a B requirement, MotoGP has an A requirement. So somewhere like Barber, even though right now it probably wouldn't be at that A standard for the FIM, it could get to it quite easily in all likelihood. There's a few areas in Barber that are a little bit hit and miss.
There's one thing as well that Brian was talking about. He said expansion was possible, and it's been looked at. They've done geological studies to see if it would be possible. And also just look at the calendar for 2025. I mean, Hungary is on there. That still has to be homologated and, still has to undergo some renovation work or some adjustments to be able to sort of cage MotoGP. Like I said, that the feeling of possibilities just seems there, whereas Indianapolis apparently aren't interested. Laguna Seca, we know, has limitations, although those seem to be kind of loosening if you kind of believe what you read on the internet. Always a folly, of course. But yeah, it's, I don't know. My visit to Barber was not just cool for the museum, but also just to see how the circuit could potentially sort of enter sort of MotoGP and Superbike coverage.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones that, just because you mentioned Laguna, what I was just about to say was the fact that there are some places where Barber's on the limit, but there is room to be able to maneuver and give yourself the chance to be able to change the gravel traps a little bit or give it a little bit more runoff. Laguna is obviously a slightly different set of circumstances, but they really want to have a world championship again. They repaved the whole circuit. They've paid a lot of money to do that, and it's put in a world championship again. I do think that Superbikes is probably the only world championship they can put there, just because endurance at Laguna would be just ludicrous. And then for something like MotoGP, it would be dangerous. So I think that you could go to Laguna for Superbikes. Indy was a really cool place to have the race because Indy is a motorsport town. But I think Barber would be special just because of what you have with the museum. You've got endless possibilities for making it into a very unique event. Because if you look at Motegi, it's the Honda Museum. But if you go to Barber, you've got everything. And like I remember, even just like from my cursory look through what they have in Barber over the last few years, I remember seeing that they had John Surtees MV from one of his championship winning 500 seasons, which would probably have been 56 or something like that. And they also had his 1964 Formula One Ferrari there. So you've immediately got the most unique piece of MotoGP history. The guy that won it on 2 and 4 wheels. They've got all the Lotus F1 cars.
Stuff.
They've got the biggest collection of those. They've got loads of Dan Gurney's cars. They've got the Daytona collection, the motocross collection, Supercross, flat track, all this. So there's so many things that give you the option to be able to do something really interesting with it. And I think probably the best thing as well, and I don't know if you got to see it just because it's not too readily available, but the maintenance floor, they want these bikes to run. They want them to be out on
downstairs.
track. And I think that's the coolest thing. So to see all that motivation is really cool. And I know that you really enjoyed speaking to Brian from the facility. And we're going to play that interview in now into the show. But just before we do, one last question, Ad. Would you go back?
Yeah, 100%. Because like I said, we only had an hour to look around and you need more than that. You kind of discover these little jewels. And the thing is as well, if you like motorcycles, not just racing ones, generally there's pretty much every landmark or milestone model you can think of from across the brands, you know, whether you're talking about the 50s, 60s, 70s. For me, it was great just to see sort of, you know, the NR750 or the RC30, you know, the 916, there's a Senna version in there. There's some real kind of special motorcycles that's owned by Barber as well. It's not that they loan them in. It's all sort of their own proprietary motorcycles or property there. It's really quite special in that aspect. So yes, mate, I'll definitely go back.
Well, let's hear from yourself and Brian from the Grand Prix of the Americas, where we've got 20 minutes of just really good insight into how the facility came about, what's in it, and why everyone should go.
Brian, thanks ever so much for joining us. You've come all the way from Alabama to the Red Bull Grand Prix of the Americas. You brought some special cargo for this weekend, right?
Yes, that's right. My family joined me. This is their first GP experience, so yeah, we're camping in Texas.
I was actually talking about the KR211V, but that's currently parked in Alpine Stars.
Yes. So that is also special cargo. Yes, very interesting motorcycle from 2006. It's Kenny Roberts Jr.'s GP bike with the Honda-powered RC211V V5 motor, the 990cc. It's a really special machine, and we're so happy that it's part of the Barber collection now, where people get to see it.
I was at Barber, of course, earlier this week, on Sunday actually, so almost a week ago. You were very enthusiastic about this particular bike. I mean, you said, you know, when it was started up, the particular sound, you know, of that engine configuration. I mean, it
sounds incredible. It's unreal. I remember the morning that I heard it fire up the first time. I knew I had Chuck Honeycutt in the shop in the basement of the museum working on it, so I knew the plan that we were going to get it running, but I didn't know when it was going to start up. So I was in my office upstairs on the 4th floor, and I heard this rumble of a beast of a motor, you know, fire to life, and I knew immediately that he had fired it up without me in the room, and I quickly ran down there and got to see it, and that's really the first time I've been that close to the 211V, and it's just this ungodly sound. It's unreal. It doesn't sound like anything else. It's like a V4 with an extra cylinder in there. So it was really wild. And I remember the people that were in the museum that day all came to the railings and, what is that? What does that sound? It was impressive. So
it's a special motorcycle, and for the second year in a row, Barber is bringing these historical pieces, these kind of artifacts to MotoGP. I mean, you were here last year, with the Robertses showing off 2 bikes that now have pride of place in the Barber Museum. I mean, is this like a direction you guys have? I mean, the links with MotoGP, do you want to get closer? Do you want to do more racing activities?
Well, I think it's Grand Prix, so it is the premier class in the world, right? And so, with 75 plus years history now in Grand Prix racing, we have so many examples in the collection of Grand Prix bikes in the past. In the modern era, so from 2002 onward, the collection is a little scarce, so having a machine like the KR211V is an example of modern era MotoGP. So we have one race now in America. There should be more. I've been to most of them. Laguna Seca, Indianapolis, and now Austin, and now we just have Austin, and so there should be more races. But yeah, GP racing, I mean, there's nothing better. So
I want to grill you on that in a moment, but first I want to talk about the museum because our sort of friend and colleague Matthew Miles told me about it, and I figured, well, I've seen plenty of museums. I've been to KTM's Motor Hall, the Ducati Museum in Bologna, Harley Davidson in Milwaukee, Yamaha's Communication Plaza. But I've said, on this podcast a couple of times, I was just overawed when I walked in the building at Barber, and I was really happy that coincidentally the Supercross had been happening at Birmingham down the road. So it was
right, yeah.
The only shame was not to have more time to look around, but you were telling me there's almost 2,000 motorcycles there. There's a huge racing emphasis. The scale of the architecture of the building alone, never mind what's inside. I just wonder if you go to work every day and there's something that catches your eye, because I think there's this, it's almost like a bit of a Willy Wonka's chocolate factory of racing memorabilia.
It's a really special place to work at every day. Yeah, it's you're never bored. There's always something to look at, and yeah, with close to 2,000 bikes in the collection, we're running out of room. There's nowhere to put things anymore, so we're hanging things on walls and from ceilings, and there's a lot of machines there. There's close to 160 cars now, and so it's a motorsports museum. It's not just a motorcycle museum. The motorcycle collection overshadows everything, of course, but there's a lot of race cars, a lot of race history, but it's really a good snapshot of 150 years of two-wheeled power and speed. So it's really an exciting place.
You said you've been collecting off-road models for like the last 10 years.
About 10 years, yeah. And so we've got a good dirt collection, from early speedway bikes into flat track, into desert racing, all the way through modern motocross bikes. So yeah, it's a good collection now.
Yeah, the diversity is impressive as well. Like you said, there's various disciplines, as well as the production bikes and very rare models in there as well. And then, of course, the racing emphasis. The special section on the Daytona 200 is quite nice to see.
There's a Daytona
well.
corner, yeah. There's some special bikes in there, and it's really, like you said when you were there, you can't breeze through it in just a couple of hours. If you're really an enthusiast, it'll take a whole day easily to go through the entire collection. a lot of people come in and they'll get a hotel and they'll stay the weekend, and especially if there's an event going on the track. So it takes a while to go through it.
Also, the space itself was created especially for the models, right? It was not just a case of, all right, let's just fill this building with a lot of bikes and cars.
That's right. It was George Barber, our founder. He wanted the machines themselves to be the art, like a gallery, an art gallery, where you go into art museums and the architecture is typically very stark and white because the art needs to be the focal point. And so that's what he wanted for a motorcycle museum, which was kind of against the grain of what you're used to seeing, especially in America, with roadside museums and metal buildings with no windows. And so he wanted to go the opposite direction. And so in late 90s, he started making plans to build the current Barber Vintage Motorsports Museum, and modeled it after a parking garage type of layout, which on the surface is a brilliant idea because it's multi-level. There is a central rotunda of walkways and ramps for people to circulate, but if you look at a similar parking garage design, it's the same design. So you move the cars around centrally, and so it worked really well to show off a massive collection of motorcycles and give it an open, airy feel to it, where you could be standing on any given floor and look down into another floor, and something would catch your eye, and you could go there.
The wow factor is evident from the moment you walk through the door. If there's one strength to the collection, I think it's the fact that you can get really up close to these bikes. You can walk around them, you can look at them. They're not sort of fenced off with a piece of rope, 2 meters away.
Yes, very open.
Yeah, that's something that's very strong. I think if there's one small weakness of it, then there needs to be maybe more engagement, or there could be more storytelling with particular bikes or certain collections, maybe specific eras. I mean, is that something you guys could work on?
That's right. Yeah, that's really the future of the museum, is digging deeper into the storytelling of the people behind a lot of these iconic motorcycles and cars. And so we've there's so much opportunity to tell those stories. And the World Champions display that we unveiled last year was a start of that for World Champions, and of which we have multiple machines in the collection that are just kind of hidden around and scattered amongst the collection. But we're bringing those kind of to the forefront to show them off.
I think it's important to mention also that when you go to Barber, it's not just a museum and a collection. I mean, downstairs, the workshop facility is impressive. And then if you go up to the top floor, like you said, there's the design studio where you've got one of the most revered motorcycle designers, in the industry.
Yes.
And you yourself as a designer and a motorcycle builder. I mean, again, this is like a playground effect.
There's lots of different disciplines going on in one building, from restoration activities and working on cars and bikes in the basement, to all the exhibits in the upper floors, and then education, which is really a new area. Again, really started almost 10 years ago, having a focused effort in education and hosting school groups. From now out-of-state schools are coming in every day, and so we have a new education department. And the design center on the top floor is where I started at Barber. Sorry. The design center on the top floor is where I started almost 6 years ago. And that was a concept in working together with our founder, George Barber. He wanted to explore what the future was. So we had kind of the history covered, right? So 150 years of motorcycling history is already there on display in the museum. And we came up with this concept to showcase design and engineering, how those two disciplines lead to some of these, beautiful examples that we have on display. And so I did that for 2 years up there and got that center up and running. And in that time frame, I was added to the board of directors, and then ultimately became the executive director of Barber. I had known Pierre Terblanche for many years, and he was looking for a way to get back to the U.S. He had a house in Birmingham. He had bought a house years ago, a second house, so he could travel back and forth. And so we brought him on at the museum, and now he works every day up in the design center, and he mentors students who come through and shows people a glimpse into the world of industrial design. And he's up there designing workstations, like a clay modeling workstation for designers, like the ultimate toolbox, from the mind of a master level motorcycle designer. It's really cool to watch.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough for people who are remotely interested in how motorcycles are created or put together, or even the styling of them, the ergonomics, the aesthetics, get up to that part of the facility, because it's really revealing. I mean, you have the 3D printing aspect, the clay modeling aspect. I think that's a little kind of crown jewel, if you like.
Sure.
It's
you get to see the past and the present, and then we're exploring, and Pierre is really great about staying current with technology. And so he's exploring all these different AI mediums and software, and designing things at just a very impressive rate of speed. It's digital workflows, and so that's all on display for people to see. How a designer comes up with ideas. It's really fun.
I think also one of the most impressive parts of being at Barber for me also is the scope you guys have, or maybe the approach, because it's not like, okay, we're happy with our collection, that's it. It seems like you're prepared, you have the resources, the budget to source other motorcycles or other possibilities. You're looking for opportunities. I don't want to use a phrase as coarse as like an open checkbook, but you have, this mentality to find, kind of really interesting pieces.
We used to look a lot more, and with the collection being close to 2,000 motorcycles now, there's not a whole lot more motorcycles out there to get, in the whole world, and it's starting to become real. But we still find things that we need to have in the collection. Important, significant milestone designs that were not only significant, but maybe they led to another important milestone. They're a precursor to another model. Things like the Britain, for instance, the V1000 Britain. For its time in the mid-90s, countless designs after the Britain that were influenced by the Britain. You can see those design trends in full view at the museum, and it's really great.
Because Barber own the bikes, it's not like you loaning collections.
That's
and
right.
they have to move.
It's not a traditional museum where we do a lot of loans, where we take in loans. Everything is there, so we can almost curate our own exhibitions from our own machines, and it's really great. And it's an area that we're working to explore more. Is have a focused highlight on things within our own collection, and not have to go out and find them. They're already there.
And as people who follow racing will know, we're not just talking about a museum sort of in the depths of Alabama here. I mean, the motorsport circuit itself that surrounds the facility is incredibly busy. I think you told me it's occupied for like 300 days a year.
Yeah, it's over 300. And a lot of that has to do with our close relationship with Porsche in North America. They run a driving school at Barber Motorsports Park, And so that, takes up half the year right there. And then there's a number of spectator events like IndyCar coming up next month in May. And that's probably our biggest spectator event. And there will be over 100,000 people there over the weekend for IndyCar. We've got Moto America next week, which I have to get back to right away.
It's going to be a busy week, huh?
And we're really excited about Moto America coming and be the season opener points race for the new Talent Cup series. I'm really looking forward to seeing them there. And what else? We've got some car races, WRL and SRO. So.
And the festival, the classic festival, right?
The Vintage Festival is always the first weekend in October, and that is one of the largest vintage motorcycle events in the country now. And there's a huge swap meet with that, so there'll be 500 vendors just in the swap meet alone. And it's just wall-to-wall bikes everywhere from all eras. And lately, the past few years, I've been to 19 of the Barber Vintage Festivals now, and this is our 20th this year, so our 20th anniversary Vintage Festival. And I've really seen a growing trend in the modern superbike era being the new vintage, right?
Okay.
So
yeah.
1975 and up, it's just exploding. And you'll see it in the marketplace too, with like RC30s going for $50,000, so it's super bikes are now vintage, right? So it's really, really fun. It's a good time.
Brian, we're at the Grand Prix. You mentioned Laguna. You mentioned Indianapolis. We're here in Austin. When it comes to MotoGP possibly coming to Barber, I hear people say, no, it's not possible because it's too short. It's too compact. You won't get all the fans in, which, you just mentioned crowd figures for IndyCar alone. What's the reality? I mean, what is the potential of MotoGP being at Barber?
I think, well, it's tough to compare Barber to a lot of other tracks. It is a different track. There's no grandstands, and it's all grass seating. So our grandstands are grass, and it's part of the design, and that's why it looks so beautiful. And you see these sweeping aerial views of it. You don't see bleachers everywhere. You just see fans sitting in the grass. It's
part of the land, isn't it?
It's part of the land. That's why it's called the Garden of Speed. It's a beautiful place. So it doesn't fit the mold necessarily for a typical GP race, but I'm sure there are ways to overcome that if it were at all possible. Like I said, there needs to be more GPs in America. Barber would be a beautiful place to host it, and it wouldn't look like any other track in the world. Plus, there's a giant history museum attached to it, right? So that introduces a whole other level of heritage and legends adjacent to a race course. So could it happen? I don't know. It's a lot of things would have to take place, but who knows?
Not just mentioning the infrastructure, but would the track need some modifications? Is there some areas where...
I don't really think it does. I mean, it's 2.38 miles, 16 turns. We made a bunch of modifications years ago for IndyCar, so it's FIA Grade 2 rated for IndyCar racing. So from what I've seen, the runoffs are adequate. The track is flawless, and we run super bikes there, and so it could host a race right now. Where it lacks is probably in facilities, paddock and room for all the service vehicles and those sorts of things. But that's just buildings and asphalt,
Based right now here in 2025, would you say MotoGP is like a mile away from happening at Barber, or is it just maybe a couple 100 meters?
It's tough to say. Yeah, it's tough to say.
Do you think? I mean, Dorna being quite cooperative, are they being open-minded about the GP happening?
I think there's a growing consensus that there needs to be more GPs in America.
Yeah.
So where that could be, I don't know.
Okay. Brian, listen, thanks ever so much for your time. Now I'll let you get back to the family.
Thank you.
Of course, the KR211V, parked there in Alpine Stars. We're putting this podcast out after the Grand Prix. So hoping everything goes well and we get some good action here this weekend. And of course, anybody listening who's mildly curious about the best motorcycle collection I've seen in the world, then, pass by, get down to Alabama near Birmingham. It's not far away. It's just 20 minutes up the road from the city. So it's easy to make a visit. And then, Brian, we hope to see you again at a race soon.
Yeah.
Maybe MotoGP next year or Supercross next year.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.